Part 43. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji Sheng Chong. Chapter 421. It was obvious that Yu at this time also sneered at the ancestor's curse. There was only a slight sneer on the corner of his mouth, and his eyes were full of mockery. Is it useful to curse this thing? I didn't expect that you, an old immortal, would stay here quietly. You didn't forget about it? In the end, you had to end up like this. In the end, you ended up with the end of your life is that you brought it upon yourself, right? At this time, Yu began to look around. He wanted to find out where the mechanisms were, but after looking around for a long time, Yu found nothing. Yu just half squinted his eyes, a bit of confusion flashed in his eyes. At this moment, his brows seemed to be knitted together, and then he raised his eyebrows slightly. Eyebrow. It's strange. It's really strange. Why can't I feel anything now? At this time, Yehi felt a little bit of it, and then a bit of joy flashed in his eyes. I seem to feel something, but I'm not sure. At this time, after Yu heard what Yehi said, a bit of excitement flashed in his eyes, and then he turned his head and glanced at Yehi. It should be that the old guy from before forcibly expelled me from the Ye family and cut off the bloodline of my Ye family. That's why I'm like this now. This old guy deserves to die. At this time, Yu said in a cold voice, with a gloomy murderous intention in the corners of his eyes and brows. At this time, Yehi pointed toward his southwest, and then a bit of excitement flashed in his eyes. There seems to be something in the southwest, it seems to be a mechanism or something, but I don't know much about these things. After Yu heard what Yehi said, he rushed towards the southwest, and in the southwest, Yehi saw a gate. There's a gate. Yehi pointed like this, then turned his head and glanced at Yu. Would you like to go in? At this time, Yu and Lu Xingyi could not see anything. There were some complex colors flashing in their eyes. At this time, Yu's brows seemed to be twisted together. Did you really see that door? Yehi nodded heavily. Can't you two see it? At this time, Yu took a deep breath, and then nodded slightly. Yes, the two of us are indeed invisible. It seems that only the blood of the Ye family can feel this. Yu's expression condensed slightly, and a hint of solemnity flashed through the corners of his eyes and brows. The two of us can't even see the door, but there is a way you can try. After Yehi heard what Yu said, he turned his head and glanced in his direction. A bit of confusion flashed in his eyes, and then he raised his eyebrow slightly. Eyebrow. Is there any way I can try it? Tell me. At this time, Yu suddenly smiled. Then use your blood to make this door visible. At this time, after Yehi heard what Yu said, he was also slightly stunned, and then a special color flashed in his eyes. This way you won't waste too much blood essence. At this time, Yu just waved his hand slightly, and then became so annoyed that he rolled his eyes at Yehi. I just need a drop of your blood. At this time, Yehi also nodded like this, and then he breathed a sigh of relief. Just one drop of essence and blood is enough. As long as it is one drop of essence and blood, this is naturally not a problem. Let me give it a try. At this time, Yehi still mustered up his courage, and then walked forward cautiously. At this time, he bit his finger, and then squeezed out a drop of blood. Got to that door. Then a dazzling golden light flashed, and then the doctor's ancient door was suddenly revealed in front of everyone. At this time, Yu's eyes were full of excitement, and the smile at the corner of his mouth became more and more obvious. It's great, it's simply great, I knew it would be okay to do this, ha ha ha, I knew it would be okay to do it. At this time, Yu's speech was already a little incoherent. At this time, Yehi and Lu Xingyi also had a flash of panic in the corners of their eyes and brows. For some reason, they always felt that Yu was a little scary at this time. As for why they felt this way, even I can't even explain it myself. Ye Yu turned around and glanced at the two of them. Go in now. Ye Hai and Lu Xingyi nodded solemnly, and then they walked forward. In fact, of course they knew Ye Yu's purpose, which was to use the two of them as cannon fodder in case something happened. If there is a problem, it will be the two of them that will cause trouble. But due to Ye Yu's power, even if they knew this, they had no choice but to follow Ye Yu's instructions honestly. The two of them stood up and walked in. When they stepped inside, an extremely mysterious force surrounded them. At this time, Lin Yu and everyone from the Ye family were also keeping vigil. Lin Yu knelt for 7 days during the vigil, and everyone from the Ye family knelt with Lin Yu for 7 days. Then until the funeral, Lin Yu and a few strong men were carrying the coffin. Lin Yu didn't use any spiritual power for this 1,000 jin coffin. At this time, every step he took was as difficult as climbing to the sky. After the old man was buried, Lin Yu's spiritual power in his danshan was almost concentrated. At this moment, he just sighed quietly, with a somewhat complicated meaning in his eyes. It's time to leave this place. Lin Yu said in a cold voice, with a somewhat complicated look in his eyes. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji Sheng Chong. Chapter 422. As for all the people in the Ye family, they built several houses next to the tomb. Although the houses were quite simple, they could at least shelter from the wind and rain. Lin Yu set a ban on them, stipulating that one person could go out to buy some food every week, but only for 7 hours, and they had to go back within 7 hours. If they didn't go back, they would definitely die. At this time, Lin Yu just wanted to pack up and leave, and at this moment, a woman ran over in a panic. Lin Yu glanced at the woman, and his eyes were quite complicated. What are you doing here? You are the head of the Ye family. Shouldn't you be with them to guard my grandfather's spirit? At this time, there was no fluctuation in Lin Yu's voice, and people could not tell whether he was sad or happy. Ye Lingxiu heard Lin Yu, and after saying this, she bit her upper lip with her lower lip, and a bitter smile appeared at the corner of her mouth, and then she knelt down on the ground with a plop. When Lin Yu saw Ye Lingxiu like this, his brows slightly condensed, and then he glanced at Ye Lingxiu coldly, with a few cold lights in his eyes. What are you doing? At this time, Ye Lingxiu's mouth corners also raised a few bitter smiles. It seems that something happened to the Ye family. Someone entered the ancestral temple of the Ye family. I hope you can help the Ye family. At this time, Lin Yu heard Ye Lingxiu, and after saying this, he also laughed so hard. At this time, he seemed to be completely crazy, with a faint smile on the corners of his mouth. He turned his head and stared at Ye Lingxiu. At this moment, Lin Yu gently lifted Ye Lingxiu's chin, his eyes full of gloom. You actually have the nerve to ask me to help the Ye family now. I didn't kill them, which is already a great favor. Now you actually want me to help them. Come and tell me yourself, what do you think? Lin Yu's eyes stared straight at Ye Lingxiu, and the sneer at the corner of his mouth became more and more obvious. At this time, Ye Lingxiu, after hearing what Lin Yu said, his eyes and eyebrows were full of helplessness. I know this request may be a bit excessive, but if you don't help the Ye family will be finished. After hearing what Ye Lingxiu said, Lin Yu also laughed so hard. At this time, his eyes and eyebrows were full of madness. You asked me to help the Ye family, so what do you have to ask me to help the Ye family? Or is your only asset your pretty face? At this time, Lin Yu leaned over and came to Ye Lingxiu's ear, and he whispered, you can ask me to help you, as long as you serve me happily, I can agree to anything you want. At this time, Lin Yu just wanted Ye Lingxiu to give up. He knew that Ye Lingxiu was a girl who kept herself clean, so he also knew that Ye Lingxiu would never agree to his excessive request. At this time, Ye Lingxiu slowly turned her head and looked at Lin Yu. Her eyes were fixed on Lin Yu, and a sad smile appeared at the corner of her mouth. At this time, Ye Lingxiu seemed to have made up her mind. Are you serious? If I really do what you said, will you help the Ye family? At this time, Lin Yu stood with his hands behind his back, and at this time, he heard a sparse voice coming from behind him. In less than a quarter of an hour, Ye Lingxiu hugged Lin Yu. At this time, Lin Yu suddenly turned around. Woman, do you really think I dare not? At this time, Ye Lingxiu sneered, aren't all you men like this? As long as you want, I am yours, and the worst that can happen is that I will give it to you. Ye Lingxiu's mouth corners curled up a few sneers, and the corners of her eyes and eyebrows were full of contempt and mockery. At this time, after seeing Ye Lingxiu's eyes, Lin Yu directly lifted her chin with his hands, his eyes stared straight at Ye Lingxiu, and a sneer curled up at the corners of his mouth. Really? Since you think so, then I will do as you wish. At this time, Lin Yu had completely lost his mind. After all, for so many days, he had actually been suppressing the anger in his heart. Lin Yu needed something to vent his anger. He originally thought that there might be some ferocious and brutal beasts in the desert. If he left now, it would be a good idea to use those ferocious and brutal beasts to vent his anger. But Ye Lingxiu came to him. I don't know how long it took, Ye Lingxiu almost fainted. After Lin Yu calmed down, he felt that Ye Lingxiu was almost numb. At this time, he suddenly felt a little more ashamed in his heart. He opened his mouth, as if he wanted to say something. But at this time, Ye Lingxiu just turned her head and looked at him, with a sneer on the corner of her mouth. There was no more innocence and sweetness in this smile. Are you satisfied now? If you are satisfied, can you help me now? Ye Lingxiu's eyes were fixed on Lin Yu, and at this moment, Lin Yu's face showed a bit of complexity. At this time, he slowly stood up. Okay, let me help you. Ye Lingxiu smiled, thank you. From now on, we will not owe each other anything. After Ye Lingxiu finished speaking, she stood up and got dressed. Lin Yu's eyes were fixed on Ye Lingxiu's back. He didn't know why, but he just felt like his heart was filled with something. It felt like it was pricked suddenly. Sorry. Lin Yu said suddenly. At this moment, Ye Lingxiu suddenly paused. She slowly turned her head and glanced at Lin Yu, with the corners of her mouth curling up. A bit of a wry smile. No need to say sorry to me. This is what the Ye family owes you, I will go to the Ye family to pay it back. After Ye Lingxiu finished speaking, she continued to clean up like this. At this time, Lin Yu's eyes were staring directly at Ye Lingxiu's back. Some complicated emotions emerged in his heart, and even more at the corners of his mouth. It evoked a bit of a wry smile. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji Sheng Chong. Chapter 423. After Ye Lingxiu cleaned up, the two people rushed directly towards the Ye family. The two of them were extremely fast. In just a moment, they had already arrived in front of the Ye family. At this time, when Lin Yu came to Ye's house, he only felt that there seemed to be something nearby, something seemed not quite right. Lin Yu's face condensed, and a strange color flashed in his eyes. At this time, Ye Lingxiu turned around, glanced at Lin Yu, and then raised her eyebrows slightly. What's wrong? Did you find something? Ye Lingxiu's eyes were fixed on Lin Yu, and there was a strange light in the corners of her eyes and brows. There is indeed something wrong, because I felt an evil breath. The smell was very unpleasant. I don't know if it was an illusion or something else. After Lin Yu finished speaking, he turned around, glanced at Ye Lingxiu, and then smiled like this. After Ye Lingxiu heard what Lin Yu said, Her face was slightly condensed, and a strange light flashed in the corners of her eyes and brows. According to what you said, it is indeed good. It seems that this time they have indeed colluded with outsiders to plot against the Ye family. Damn it, damn it. Ye Lingxiu said through gritted teeth. After Lin Yu heard what Ye Lingxiu said, he spread his hands helplessly. Maybe, it is indeed a bit hateful. But having said that, I seem to feel the aura of an epic alien egg in your Ye family. I didn't expect that your Ye family's heritage is so rich. This is really something I didn't expect. After Ye Lingxiu heard what Lin Yu said, she turned her head and glanced at Lin Yu. I beg you, that epic alien egg was left by the ancestor of the Ye family in case of emergencies. If you need it, can you please not take it away? Ye Lingxiu's eyes were fixed on Lin Yu. At this time, after hearing what Ye Lingxiu said, Lin Yu just smiled and spread his hands. Don't worry, I won't ask for anything that doesn't belong to me. Lin Yu's eyes were full of determination. When Ye Lingxiu heard what Lin Yu said, she nodded slightly. Okay, thank you. At this time, Ye Lingxiu's voice was trembling slightly. At this time, Lin Yu just rubbed Ye Lingxiu's little head so gently, with a bit of doting flashing in the corners of his eyes and brows. What happened before? At this time, Lin Yu could clearly feel that when his hand touched Ye Lingxiu's body trembled slightly. At this time, Ye Lingxiu waved her hand, and then turned her head, glanced at Lin Yu, and smiled. What happened before? I have such a bad memory that I forgot about it. Let's hurry up and see what happened. After Ye Lingxiu finished speaking, she stepped forward and stood up and walked out. At this time, Lin Yu's eyes were fixed on Ye Lingxiu's back. There was a bit of complexity in his eyes, and finally he also sighed leisurely. Oh, it's all my fault. But now, even if Lin Yu regrets what he did in the past, all of this can no longer be made up for. Lin Yu's lips also evoked a bit of a bitter smile, and in the corners of his eyes and brows, he was completely a kind of helplessness. At this time, Lin Yu chased Ye Lingxiu, and then two people came immediately, arriving in front of their Ye family's ancestral hall. After seeing this scene, Lin Yu couldn't help but feel, with his eyes half squinted like this, a somewhat complicated meaning flashed through his eyes. It's strange, it's really strange. When Ye Lingxiu heard Lin Yu say this, she turned around and glanced at Lin Yu. A bit of confusion flashed in her eyes, and then she raised her eyebrow slightly. Raise an eyebrow. What's weird? Ye Lingxiu's eyes were staring straight at Lin Yu. At this time, she frowned slightly, and there was a look of complete confusion in the corners of her eyes and brows. At this time, Lin Yu glanced at the ancestral hall of the Ye family, and then pointed like this. There is still a small space in it that has been hidden by others, so I always feel that this is a bit strange. At this time, after Ye Lingxiu heard what Lin Yu said, a special color appeared in the corners of her eyes and eyebrows, and then she raised her eyebrows slightly. Is there any space hidden here? This is a bit. At this time, Lin Yu heard Ye Lingxiu and nodded slightly after saying this. Yes, there is indeed a hidden space here, that's why I always feel so weird. I swear, it must be like this. Ye Lingxiu's face also condensed slightly, and then she half squinted her eyes. Then if you say so, wouldn't we be in danger? Ye Lingxiu turned her head and stared directly at Lin Yu. At this time, Lin Yu nodded helplessly, with a bitter smile on the corner of his mouth. What he said is indeed true. We are indeed in some danger, but it's not bad. After hearing what Lin Yu said, Ye Lingxiu's eyes and eyebrows were full of confusion. What do you mean? It's dangerous, but the strength of these people should not be very good. I should be able to handle it myself. Just follow me and it will be fine. Lin Yu and Ye Lingxiu walked towards the ancestral hall. When they arrived at the entrance of the Ye family ancestral hall, they saw two corpses. At this time, after Ye Lingxiu saw the two corpses, her voice trembled slightly. Fifth uncle and third uncle, what's wrong? What's wrong with you? Don't scare me, open your eyes and look at me, open your eyes and look at me. At this time, Yelingxiu's voice trembled slightly, and Yelingxiu's eyes were staring straight at the two corpses. At this time, after seeing this scene, Lin Yu just felt that Yelingxiu was a little distressed. At this time, he gently held Yelingxiu in his arms, and a few complex colors flashed in his eyes. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji Sheng Chong. Chapter 424. At this time, Yelingxiu seemed to be unable to bear it any longer, and then she immediately fell into Lin Yu's arms and began to cry. At this time, Lin Yu gently held Yelingxiu in his arms. There was quite a bit of sympathy in the corners of his eyes and brows, and a bitter smile appeared at the corners of his mouth. It's okay, everything will pass, everything will pass. At this time, Lin Yu was gently rubbing Yelingxiu's little head. At this time, Yelingxiu slowly raised her head and glanced at Lin Yu. The pear blossoms looked like rain. It's quite pitiful. After a while, Yelingxiu also had a bitter smile on her lips. Why? It's okay for the two of them to eat inside and outside. Why do they want to harm my compatriots of the Ye family like this? They deserve to die, they deserve to die. At this time, Yelingxiu was even a little hysterical. The corners of his eyes and brows were filled with a sense of madness. At this moment, after Lin Yu saw Yelingxiu like this, he only felt that he felt a burst of guilt and self-blame towards the girl in front of him. Don't worry, if you meet them again later, I will find a way to kill them for you. Lin Yu said in a cold voice, the corners of his eyes and brows filled with a gloomy meaning, and the killing intent on his body was even more awe-inspiring. At this time, after Yelingxiu heard Lin Yu say this, the bitter smile at the corner of her mouth became more and more obvious, and then she shook her head. In a moment, I will kill them with my own hands. I must let them know what betrayal is and the price of the Ye family. The previous innocence in Yelingxiu's eyes finally disappeared at this time. At this moment, after hearing what Yelingxiu said, Lin Yu just sighed quietly, and then shook his head helplessly. Hey, don't be sad, let's go in and take a look first. Let's see what's in this issue. After Yelingxiu heard what Lin Yu said, she nodded slightly, and then followed Lin Yu directly into the ancestral hall of my Ye family. When the two of them stepped in, after this, the Ye family's ancestral hall. At this time, Lin Yu suddenly felt an extremely evil and terrifying power. Others might not be able to see it, but Lin Yu could. At this time, Lin Yu had a flash of anger in the corners of his eyes and brows. The meaning of solemnity. At this moment, his brows seemed to be knitted together. Damn it, damn it. After Lin Yu thought of this, he followed the aura directly to the door of the ancestral temple. At this time, he turned his head and glanced at Yelingxiu, and then gently pointed to the door. That's it, can you feel that door and open it? At this time, after hearing what Lin Yu said, Yelingxiu turned around and glanced in the direction Lin Yu pointed, and then the corners of his eyes and brows were filled with a sense of disbelief. Her eyes were fixed on Lin Yu's body, and her brows were slightly furrowed. How do you know that the door hidden in the Ye family's ancestral hall is here? After Lin Yu heard what Yelingxiu said, he also smiled like this, but it's just because that evil aura that makes me faintly sick is around here. After Yelingxiu heard what Lin Yu said, she nodded lightly at that time, and some complex colors flashed in her eyes. Although I can open this door now, I don't know, can you see this door? After Yelingxiu finished speaking, she just waved her hand gently, and then the door opened slowly. After a moment, a simple door suddenly opened. The moment was displayed in front of Lin Yu. At this time, Lin Yu just felt a majestic aura rushing towards his face. His face also condensed slightly, and a strange light flashed in the corners of his eyes and eyebrows. It's strange. It's really strange. Why do you feel like this? After hearing what Lin Yu said, Ye Lingxiu turned her head and glanced at Lin Yu, with some complex colors flashing in her eyes. What happened? It's a very strange feeling. There is a bit of desolation in it. I feel like. When Lin Yu said this, he paused. When Ye Lingxiu heard what Lin Yu said, she was as confused as a 2-foot-tall monk, and her beautiful eyes were fixed on her. Lin Yu's body. What happened? Be careful when you go in. I always feel that there is an extremely evil and chaotic aura in it. That aura is like garbage in a garbage dump, making people feel a little sick. At this time, after Ye Lingxiu heard what Lin Yu said, a somewhat complicated meaning flashed in her eyes, and then she frowned and condensed slightly. Okay, I'll be more careful for a while, but you must also be careful, don't be impulsive, let alone act out of anger. Ye Lingxiu's eyes were fixed on Lin Yu, and there was quite a bit of complexity in her beautiful eyes. At this time, Lin Yu nodded slightly. Then, the two of them walked forward cautiously. After walking for a while, Ye Lingxiu suddenly stopped. She turned her head and glanced at Lin Yu, and there was quite a bit of solemnity in her beautiful eyes. It's not good. At this time, Lin Yu was as confused as a 2-foot-tall monk. He had no idea what was going on. His eyes were fixed on Ye Lingxiu. What's wrong? I don't know why, but I can't open the door now. I don't know what's going on. At this time, Lin Yu heard Ye Lingxiu. After saying this, he also took a step forward, and then gently opened the door. After Ye Lingxiu saw this scene, she seemed to be stunned for an instant, and her beautiful eyes were full of disbelief. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Sheng Chang. Chapter 425. How on earth did you do it? This is a bit too difficult. Just believe it. At this time, Ye Lingxiu turned around and stared directly at Lin Yu. At this time, Lin Yu also spread his hands and shook his head. I don't know exactly. What's going on? It was just a slight push and it was pushed away. You just saw it? When Ye Lingxiu heard Lin Yu say this, she couldn't help but raise her eyebrows slightly. You are indeed a very strange guy, and I don't understand why you can do this. At this time, Lin Yu scratched his head and smiled. Maybe it's because of my extraordinary talent, maybe. At this moment, Ye Lingxiu looked at Lin Yu angrily and rolled her eyes. Don't put too much pressure on yourself here. Then the two of them stepped directly into it, but when the two of them stepped into it, a sharp sword energy rushed directly towards them. At this time, Lin Yu quickly hugged Ye Lingxiu and suddenly jumped to the side. When Ye Lingxiu saw this scene, she was stunned, with a look of disbelief in the corners of her eyes and brows. Ye Lingxiu swallowed, then turned her head, staring directly at Lin Yu. What on earth is going on? Lin Yu also shook his head. I don't know exactly, but it's a little strange anyway. At this time, the two of them walked forward. After the two of them walked for a while, they heard an angry roar. It was obvious that the two of them had entered the territory of a strange beast, which was why the beast was so angry. At this time, Lin Yu felt that after such abundant spiritual power, his face was full of joy. Great, I didn't expect that the spiritual power here is so abundant. This time don't be afraid even if there is danger. After all, Lin Yu also had the white tiger as his trump card. Even if it was dangerous, Lin Yu believed that the white tiger would be able to deal with it calmly. When Lin Yu thought of this, the corners of his eyes and brows were filled with excitement. At this time, after Ye Lingxiu on the side saw Lin Yu like this, a look of confusion flashed across her eyes and brows. Her eyes were fixed on Lin Yu. Then he raised his eyebrows slightly. Your expression and movements are a bit too weird. Did you remember something? When Lin Yu heard Ye Lingxiu say this, a meaningful smile appeared on the corner of his mouth, and then he nodded lightly. Yes, I did think of a happy thing. and at this moment, a powerful and vast force came directly towards Lin Yu. Yalingxiu seemed to feel this force, and her face began to look a little ugly. There was a hint of solemnity flashing above it. At this time, Lin Yu stepped in front of Yalingxiu. Finally, he waved his hand suddenly, and then the power disappeared in front of Yalingxiu. Although Yalingxiu knew that Lin Yu's strength was extraordinary, she never expected that Lin Yu's strength was so terrifying. At this time, her eyes were fixed on Lin Yu. There was a bit of disbelief in his eyes. At this time, Lin Yu just smiled. "Your strength is a bit scary." Lin Yu also laughed like this at that time, "Ha ha ha, not bad." Yalingxiu turned her head towards Lin Yu and rolled her eyes angrily. And at this moment, in front of them, a giant python suddenly appeared. The body of this giant python was exuding little bits of cold light. After Yalingxiu saw the giant python, her body couldn't help but tremble. She stretched out her hand and pointed at the blue-scaled python, her eyes full of fear. This is an epic-level alien beast. I didn't expect that there is such an epic-level alien beast." Lin Yu gently protected Yalingxiu behind him. At this time, he turned his head and glanced at Yalingxiu tenderly. There were also some meaningful words on the corners of his mouth. "Smile. It's just a big guy who looks disgusting. Leave it to me." Yalingxiu turned her head, her beautiful eyes full of disbelief. Her eyes were fixed on Lin Yu, and then she shook her head. "This is epic. A monster of this level, are you sure you can really deal with him?" When Lin Yu heard what Yalingxiu said, he nodded slightly. A bit of determination flashed in his eyes, and a sneer appeared at the corner of his mouth. "It's just an epic level, simple. Very good. Alien beast, blue-scaled python epic level 6, level 49. Qualification, alien, intermediate. Life, 9999999999777. Speed, 9999999999777. Defense, 9999999999777. Attack, 9999999999777. Skills, Giant Python swallows the sky, Giant Python destroys the world, Chaos God Power, Titan Space. Giant Python swallows the sky, the blue-scaled python activates a skill to enhance its fangs and toxins. The neurotoxin is twice as much as before the skill was activated. Giant Python destroys the world, the blue-scaled python activates a skill to use its huge body to directly tie up the enemy and completely kill the enemy. At this time, the hardness of the scales on the blue-scaled python becomes 3 times that of before, and the neurotoxin on the scales is twice as much as before. Chaos God Power, the blue-scaled python activates a skill at this time. The toughness of the blue-scaled python is increased to twice as much as before, the strength of the body is increased to 3 times as much as before, and the speed is increased to 1.5 times as much as before. Titan Space, the blue-scaled python activates a skill to directly tear the enemy into space. At this time, all aspects of the blue-scaled python's attributes are increased to 5 times as much as before, and it can be superimposed with the previous skills at the same time, but the time can only last for a quarter of an hour. At this time, Lin Yu sneered, "Interesting. You are listening to novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment." Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji Sheng Chong. Chapter 426. The blue-scale giant python's eyes were staring directly at Lin Yu, and the killing intent in him was unreservedly displayed at this time. At this time, the blue-scale giant python made a hissing sound from its mouth, and a majestic and vast aura was revealed from the blue-scale giant python. But for some reason, the giant blue-scaled python felt a little more fearful in his heart when he looked at the extremely weak human being in front of him, who seemed to be capable of being crushed at any time. There was a hint of gloominess in the blue-scaled python's eyes, and the killing intent in his body was even more intense. At this time, the giant blue-scaled python suddenly rushed towards Lin Yu. The speed of the giant blue-scaled python was extremely fast. In just a blink of an eye, it had already arrived in front of Lin Yu. At this time, the blue-scaled giant python spit out a mouthful of venom, and at this time, Lin Yu quickly picked up Ye Lingxiu, and the two of them suddenly jumped to the side. When Ye Lingxiu saw such a huge blue-scaled python, she was instantly stunned. At this time, she didn't know why, but she felt as if her body was out of control. At this time, Yeching just took a sudden step forward, and then his whole aura was revealed at this moment. At this time, he was about to summon the space-time beast, but then he heard the white tiger a resentful voice. Well, as I am getting older, I am easily ignored by others, but I can't blame others. Who told me that I am no longer useful now that I am so old? After Yeching heard Baihu's distant voice, he couldn't help laughing, and then he had this thought. White tiger comes out. At this time, after Baihu heard what Yeching said, he suddenly stood up and stepped forward, with a majestic and ethereal aura that was even more obvious at this moment. After Yeching felt the aura from Baihu, his expression suddenly froze, and a meaningful smile appeared on the corner of his mouth. What an interesting little tiger. At this time, Baihu seemed to understand what Yeching said. How long has it been since I came out? Who told me to let me out for some air when I got to the ruins, but I ended up like this? After the blue-scaled giant python on the side saw the white tiger, the snake's entire body felt bad, and its whole body was trembling like this. How could the giant blue-scaled python still be in the mood to attack? At this moment, he was desperately retreating back. At this time, the white tiger suddenly stood up and moved forward, his eyes staring straight at the blue-scaled python, with a look of ridicule in the corners of his eyes and eyebrows. What a piece of rubbish, little Chang Chong. Just back off and be prepared to ask me to help you. The white tiger just said it unhurriedly, and the sneer at the corner of his mouth became more and more obvious. At this time, after hearing what the white tiger said, the blue-scaled giant python suddenly took a few steps back and disappeared directly in front of the white tiger. At this time, the white tiger landed in front of Lin Yu. Ye Lingxiu stared straight at the big tiger in front of her, with a hint of joy in the corners of her eyes and brows. At this time, Ye Lingxiu gently touched the white tiger's huge head, and then smiled sweetly. This big tiger is so cute. 3 black lines appeared on Baihu's forehead. At this time, he was about to get angry, but he saw Lin Yu's gloomy gaze. At this time, Baihu was also on the verge of crying, so he could only let it go. Ye Lingxiu stroked her tiger head. When Lin Yu saw this scene, he couldn't help but shake his head and smile, with a hint of amusement flashing in his eyes. At this time, Baihu's eyes were staring straight at Lin Yu, with a hint of amusement flashing in the corners of his eyes and brows. As soon as the aura of the white tiger came out at this time, no one of the strange beasts around here dared to come forward to find someone so uncomfortable. Those strange beasts retreated away. At this time, the white tiger also walked with his head held high. After waiting for a while, Lin Yu felt a very evil aura, and that evil aura seemed to become more obvious and powerful. While walking, Ye Lingxiu saw Lin Yu stopped in place. At this time, Ye Lingxiu's eyes and brows were filled with confusion. Her eyes were staring straight at her. Looking at Lin Yu, her beautiful eyes were full of surprise. What happened? What happened? Ye Lingxiu stared straight at Lin Yu, with an expression of disbelief in the corners of her eyes and brows, and then raised her eyebrows slightly. At this time, after Lin Yu heard what Ye Lingxiu said, he turned his head and glanced at Ye Lingxiu. A bit of surprise flashed in the corners of his eyes and eyebrows. It evoked a hint of a meaningful smile. Lin Yu's smile made Ye Lingxiu a little elusive. Her eyes were staring directly at Lin Yu, and there was a bit of a wry smile at the corner of her mouth. "What's going on with you? Why are you so startled? What happened? Tell me." Ya Lingxiu's eyes were staring straight at Lin Yu, with a hint of surprise flashing across the corners of her eyes and brows. "I feel that evil aura around here again, and that aura has a nauseating feeling. I don't know what it is, but it always feels a little strange." After hearing what Lin Yu said, Ya Lingxiu's brows seemed to be knitted together. A bit of surprise flashed across the corners of Xi's eyes and brows, and then she frowned slightly. "It's strange, it's simply too strange, Tian'er, I can't explain it, I can't explain it." A strange color flashed across the corners of Lin Yu's eyes and brows, and a wry smile appeared at the corners of his mouth. At this moment, the evil aura seemed to have discovered Lin Yu, and then a sharp sword energy suddenly rushed towards Lin Yu and Ya Lingxiu. The speed was extremely fast, and he was in front of the two of them in the blink of an eye. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji Chang. Chapter 427. After seeing this scene, Lin Yu's face suddenly sank. There was a look of disbelief in the corners of his eyes and brows. At this time, his whole body was overwhelmed by the sword with such spiritual power. Jianqi was shocked. He secretly screamed something bad, and then suddenly rushed to Ya Lingxiu's side, hugged Ya Lingxiu, and turned over and walked away outside. When Ya Lingxiu saw this scene, her brows froze slightly, and she suddenly had a somewhat ominous premonition in her heart. How could such a powerful force exist in the ancestral hall of my Ya family? What is going on? It's strange, it's really strange. At this moment, after Lin Yu heard what Ya Lingxiu said, he couldn't help but frown slightly, as if his brows were knitted together. "I don't know what's going on. Anyway, it's a bit strange. It seems that I need to be more careful soon, otherwise I'm afraid." Lin Yu suddenly paused mid-sentence. At this moment, his brows seemed to be knitted together, and a wry smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. After waiting for this moment, a figure suddenly flashed in front of the two of them. The figure's eyes were fixed on Lin Yu, and the corners of his mouth were even more mocking. "Smile. I asked why this place suddenly had such a sweet and lovely atmosphere. It turns out it's because of your presence. It's interesting, but it's really interesting." The man's eyes were staring straight at Lin Yu, and there was a sneer at the corner of his mouth. There was a complete gloominess in the corners of his eyes and brows. At this time, after Lin Yu saw that person, he clenched his fists loudly, a dark murderous intent flashed in his eyes, and a mocking smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. "Interesting, kid. If I don't kill you today, it will be hard to eliminate the hatred in my heart. People from the evil tribe will deserve death. Since you had to hit the muzzle of my gun, don't blame me." At this moment, the person was just a ball of black energy, and at this moment, a low roar came out of the person's mouth, and then the person's body began to twist and deform. At the end, a strange snake with 3 heads suddenly appeared in front of everyone. The shape of this strange snake was indescribably weird. The head of this strange snake is extremely long, and has 3 heads stretched out, but their body is like the sharp claws on the feet of a wolf, and it glows with a light blue light. It looks extremely poisonous. And not only that, the monster had wings on its back. Ya Lingxiu had never seen such a terrifying monster. At this moment, her brows seemed to be knitted together, and her eyes were staring straight at the monster. The corners of her eyes and brows were full of a look of disbelief. How is it possible? How could there be such a weird monster? It's weird, it's just too weird. Ya Lingxiu said coldly. At this time, Lin Yu's face also showed an unprecedented solemnity. At this time, his brows seemed to be knitted together. It's strange, it's really strange. Logically speaking, these 3 Wolf King beasts should have been extinct long ago, but I didn't expect that we could meet them again in this place. This really makes me a little bit confused. Incredible. Lin Yu said in a cold voice calmly. A bit of surprise flashed across the corners of his eyes and eyebrows, and his brows seemed to be knitted together. At this time, the three-headed Wolf King suddenly moved forward and took a step forward. The surrounding space even had a vague feeling that it was about to collapse. Alien Beast, Three-Headed Wolf King Beast Chaos Level 6, Level 49. Qualification, Alien, Top. Life, 999999999777799. Speed, 999999999777799. Defense, 999999999777799. Attack, 999999999777799. Skills, Demonic Wolf swallows the sky, Wolf King destroys the world, Divine Claws, Three-Headed Domain. Demon Wolf swallows the sky, the Three-Headed Wolf King Beast activates its skills to completely strengthen the teeth of its three heads. It can emit an enhanced version of Soul Toxin, causing those bitten to instantly lose the ability to fight. Wolf King Destruction, the Three-Headed Wolf King Beast activates skills to strengthen its entire body, including its claws and fur, which are strengthened to 3 times its previous size. It can increase its speed and its strength to 5 times its previous size. Claws of God, the Three-Headed Wolf King Beast activates its skills to release its perseverance with its supreme power. The poison on its claws is strengthened into a poisonous thing that can destroy the world. The name of this poison, it is the Wolf King Toxin. Whether it is a human or a strange animal, as long as the upper half of the body's skin comes into contact, it will die. Three-Headed Domain, the Three-Headed Wolf King Beast activates its skills, based on its 3 heads, to release spiritual toxins, condensing a spiritual domain. In the spiritual domain, the Three-Headed Wolf King Beast is the world, and no one can control it. To truly defeat him in the spiritual realm, one must forcefully break through the realm. When Lin Yu saw this scene, there was a look of disbelief in the corners of his eyes and brows. At this time, his brows seemed to be twisted together. Lin Yu's expression darkened slightly. When he saw the Three-Headed Wolf King being so terrifying, a sneer appeared at the corner of his mouth, and then he spoke to Ye Lingxiu softly. It looks like we may be in trouble today. At this time, after Ye Lingxiu heard what Lin Yu said, the corners of her eyes and brows were filled with a sense of panic. A bitter smile appeared on the corner of her mouth, and then she turned towards Lin Yu. Take a look here. So can you still handle it now? Lin Yu's expression condensed slightly, and then he half closed his eyes and spoke coldly. I'm not sure if I can handle it, but now we can only fight to the death. Otherwise, there is nothing we can do. At this time, after Ye Lingxiu heard what Lin Yu said, there was a look of disbelief in the corners of her eyes and brows, and then she sighed quietly. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji Sheng Chong. Chapter 428. But at this time, the guy just glanced at Lin Yu so coldly, with a mocking smile on the corner of his mouth, and a look of contempt in the corners of his eyes and brows. Little guy, you are going to die no matter what today. I told you, no one can save you. Lin Yu heard it at this time. After the man finished saying this, a cold light flashed in his eyes, and the fierce murderous aura in his body was released without reservation. At this time, Lin Yu was also laughing like this. At this time, Lin Yu seemed to be completely crazy. A mysterious force burst out from Lin Yu's body. At this moment, Lin Yu also half squinted his eyes. At this moment, he could not help but frown slightly. It's strange, it's really strange. Although I also felt an evil aura before, it was not as powerful as it is now. Could it be? At this time, Lin Yu just counted with his fingers. At this time, he looked around, and the horror in his eyes began to become more and more obvious. And at this moment, the man glanced at Chu Yi coldly, with a disdainful sneer at the corner of his mouth, and his eyes were full of mockery. How is it? Little guy, have you figured out something now? When Lin Yu heard what the man said, his face was slightly startled, and then a sneer appeared at the corner of his mouth. I didn't expect that the luck and power of a city would be used to suppress you. It seems that evil tribes are rampant in the West. After the man heard what Lin Yu said, his smile began to become more and more wild and wild. His eyes were fixed on Lin Yu, and the smile at the corner of his mouth became more and more obvious. Got up. That's right, half of it is true, half of it is true. Little guy, in my opinion you should just accept death. There is no point in continuing to resist here. At this time, after Lin Yu heard what the man said, there was a look of contempt in the corners of his eyes and brows, and a sneer appeared in the corners of his mouth, and then he casually said he waved his hand. I don't know if it means anything, but I know one thing very well. After the man heard what Lin Yu said, he couldn't help but frown slightly, and then he glanced at Lin Yu coldly, and the murderous intention in his body began to surge. Stand up. Oh, that's interesting. Why don't you come and tell me about it? What do you know about it? Of course it is. Although you have chaos level aura now, you don't necessarily have chaos level strength. If I'm not wrong, you used to rely on coaxing to defeat your opponents. The man never expected that Lin Yu could actually see through him. At this moment, his eyes were fixed on Lin Yu, and a cold aura gradually began to spread from his body. Boy, you are very smart, but smart people often don't live long because they are too smart, so they want to show their intelligence everywhere, but you don't have the qualifications and strength. The man's eyes were fixed on Lin Yu, and the smile at the corner of his mouth became more and more obvious. At this time, Lin Yu's brows seemed to be knitted together. He just frowned slightly, then turned his head and glanced coldly at the man. So? What do you want to say? When the man heard what Lin Yu said, he gritted his teeth and said, I want to say that you are actually dead today. After the man finished speaking, he drew the evil power in his body into a ball, and then suddenly rushed towards Lin Yu's face. The power in that man was extremely fast. In just a moment, he was in front of Lin Yu. At this time, he suddenly laughed. There was a look of madness in the corners of the man's eyes and brows. Boy, you are no match for me, so just accept your fate and accept death. At this time, the ball of black energy directly enveloped the white tiger. After the white tiger was enveloped by this ball of black energy, he began to struggle desperately, but no matter how hard the white tiger struggled, he could not break away from the ball of black energy. The bondage of anger. At this time, after Lin Yu saw this scene, a strange color flashed in the corners of his eyes and brows. The white tiger, who was originally invincible, actually let out screams one after another at this moment. The white tiger's face became more and more gloomy. The painful look and the painful screams made Lin even more angry. I can't bear it. And at this moment, I heard the white tiger speaking coldly. Leave me alone, go kill that guy, go kill that guy. Baihu's voice was slightly trembling. At this time, after Lin Yu saw Baihu like this, he couldn't bear it in his heart, so he spoke softly at this time. Are you sure? Are you sure you can really do this? At this time, the white tiger let out a painful whine. After hearing the painful whine of the white tiger, Lin Yu felt as if his heart was stabbed by something. At this time, the white tiger was struggling in the black gas, and at this time, the body of the black gas condensed into the appearance of a person. He stood in the void, looking down on the world, proud of the heroes, staring at Lin Yu with his eyes, and a sneer appeared at the corner of his mouth. Little guy, aren't you very powerful? Let me see how powerful you are today. After he finished speaking, he laughed out loud, and there was a kind of madness in his eyes and eyebrows. At this moment, this guy seemed to be crazy. After seeing this scene, Lin Yu's eyebrows seemed to be twisted together, and then he frowned slightly. No, this guy's strength is so terrifying that it's outrageous. This is definitely not right. What's wrong with this guy? Logically speaking, he shouldn't have such strength. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Sheng Chong. Chapter 429. At this moment, a voice suddenly sounded in Lin Yu's mind. There seems to be something wrong with this space. You don't feel that every time that guy exerts force, it seems that he wants to take this place. It seems like a space has been completely swallowed up. Don't you think this is a bit strange? If we talk about strength, then the strength of the space-time beast is absolutely impossible to be the opponent of the white tiger. But if we talk about things other than strength, for example, the space governor space-time beast is definitely one of the best understanding of time and space in the world. At this time, Lin Yu followed what the space-time beast said and began to understand the power of this space bit by bit. At this time, Lin Yu's expression also condensed slightly. After a while, a hint of joy flashed across his face. That's it, that's it. No wonder, no wonder. At this time, Lin Yu was so excited that he was already a little incoherent, and the smile at the corner of his mouth began to become more and more obvious. At this moment, when the man heard Lin Yu say this, his heart suddenly condensed, and a bit of surprise flashed across the corners of his eyes and brows. This was what he was thinking at this moment. Can this little guy really discover my secret? Impossible, absolutely impossible. There is no way this little guy can have such courage and courage. This is obviously a problem. This is obviously a problem. At this moment, Lin Yu suddenly summoned the space-time beast. After the space-time beast set foot in the side of time and space, he instantly understood what the clues were in the side of the space. At this time, the space-time beast let out a howl that resounded throughout the world. The voice of the space-time beast seemed to make the whole world tremble slightly. After waiting for this moment, Lin Yu and space-time beast looked at each other. The space-time beast directly used the space tier, but the space in front of them was like an iron plate and could not be torn apart at all. But at the same time, in the sky above the ancestral hall of the Ye family, suddenly a crack appeared. Almost everyone can clearly see the existence of this crack, and everyone can also feel the terrifying pressure emanating from this space crack. At this moment, everyone's eyes and brows were filled with a sense of panic. At this time, Lin Yu suddenly smiled. His smile became more and more unrestrained, and his eyes were full of gloom. I see, since I entered this small world, I have already set foot in your domain. No wonder we have such a weird feeling. This is probably the three-headed domain activated by your three-headed wolf king beast. Lin Yu's eyes were fixed on that person, a faint smile appeared at the corner of his mouth, and the corners of his eyes and brows were filled with a mocking look. After hearing what Lin Yu said, that man's face suddenly froze at first. It looked so ugly. But after waiting for a while, the man laughed so loudly, his eyes were fixed on Lin Yu's body, and the corners of his eyes and eyebrows were fuller, showing a kind of mockery. Little guy, even I have to admit that you are indeed somewhat capable. You can actually judge that this is my three-headed domain by relying on a space-time beast. But even so, what can you do? How could it possibly escape from my three-headed realm? Come and see what kind of mess your strange beast is in now. The man's eyes were fixed on Lin Yu, and a mocking smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. At this time, Lin Yu began to feel Baihu's symptoms so carefully. When Lin Yu felt Baihu's symptoms at the moment, his face suddenly became ugly. How is that possible? It turned out that the remaining chaotic energy in the white tiger was swallowed up by the three wolf king beasts like a Taoist temple. At this time, Lin Yu's face was as pale as a blank sheet of paper. After the space-time beast saw this scene, a somewhat ominous premonition suddenly emerged in his heart. And at this moment, Lin Yu heard the space-time beast say in a cold voice, "I have some ideas, but I don't know if you are willing to use them." At this moment, Lin Yu heard the space-time beast without any clue. After saying this, the corners of his eyes and brows were full of joy. "If there is a way, of course I will use it, hurry up. Tell me, what is the solution?" At this time, Lin Yu's eyes were staring straight at the space-time beast, and there was even more joy in his eyes. At this moment, the space-time beast said unhurriedly, "Actually, it is simple. Although he has restricted all offensive skills, time-space transfer cannot restrict me. We can transfer out of this side first. Outside the space, if we come to fight again, we will naturally have a slight chance of winning." After Lin Yu heard what the space-time beast said, he also slapped himself on the forehead so hard that his voice was trembling slightly at this moment. "There is a way. If there is a way, that is the best. Then I will take back the white tiger now." After Lin Yu said this, he wanted to bring the white tiger back, but when Lin Yu wanted to take the white tiger back, his face suddenly became ugly. Because at this time, he felt that he had completely lost contact with the white tiger, and the man who saw the scene laughed at the time. His eyes were fixed on Lin Yu, and a mocking smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. "Do you suddenly feel that you have no way to summon this beast back? Boy, although your space-time beast may be able to use space-time to transfer out of my space, you should never think about taking this beast back." At this moment, Lin Yu's voice sounded in Lin Yu's mind, Master, I have a way. My scales can detoxify all poisons in the world. Even this guy's poison, I can detoxify it." Survival of the Beasts, Awakening the Beast Taming System at the Beginning. Author, Ji Sheng Chong. Chapter 430. After Lin Yu heard what Lin Yu said, the corners of his eyes and brows were filled with excitement. He was also laughing like this at this time. "Ha ha ha, okay, I know I saw you right. As long as you can detoxify this toxin, just leave this guy to me." Lin Yu's eyes flashed with a bit of coldness, and the killing intent in him at this moment was even more awe-inspiring. At this time, after Lin Yu felt the overwhelming killing intent in Lin Yu, he also understood what kind of feelings Lin Yu had for his strange beast. Bai Hu also seemed to feel Lin Yu's unyielding will. At this time, he was naturally extremely moved. In this endless black air, Bai Hu felt as if he was trapped in a swamp. At this time, Bai Hu coughed up a mouthful of blood from his mouth. The three Wolf King beasts seemed to be able to feel the weakness in the white tiger at this time. At this time, the eyes of the three Wolf King beasts were full of a kind of madness. His eyes were just like this. Nailed on Bai Hu's body, the sneer at the corner of his mouth was even more obvious. "It looks like you can't hold on anymore. I can only say sorry to you for what happened today. You must die. I said no one can stop you." The eyes of the three Wolf King beasts were fixed on the white tiger. In this dark night, after the white tiger saw the eyes of the three Wolf King beasts, his face showed a fierce light, and his feet were like this. It evoked a sneer. "Originally, I thought you just dared to be a coward. In that case, I really couldn't do anything to you. But now that you show up on your own initiative, you will definitely die." At this time, Bai Hu said coldly. At first, the three Wolf King beasts were completely indifferent, but when he saw the white tiger that should have been dying, suddenly stood up straight and pounced towards him, the three-headed Wolf King beasts were completely indifferent. The Wolf King beast's expression began to turn a little serious. At this time, the three-headed Wolf King beast wanted to shake away suddenly, but at this moment, the white tiger actually bit the neck of one of his heads, and then the white tiger also made a sound. The tiger roars. The three-headed Wolf King first felt his soul tremble slightly, and then a heartbreaking pain woke him up directly. At this time, the white tiger was holding a snake head of the three-headed Wolf King beast. The white tiger directly swallowed the snake heads of these three Wolf King beasts. Of course he knew that for these three Wolf King beasts, as long as their tongues were still there, he would still eat the snake heads no matter how high the price was. To be taken back. But the situation seems to be a little different now. After the three-headed Wolf King beast was swallowed by the white tiger, its breath began to lose rapidly. At this moment, a soft light directly enveloped the white tiger. It turned out that it was these three Wolf King beasts who lost their concentration at the moment when they were attacked by the white tiger spirit, which allowed the two people to get a trace of contact between the white tiger and Lin Yu. Lin Yu seized this opportunity and directly took the white tiger away. Come back. At this time, Lin Yu just hugged Ye Lingxiu beside him. It was a little late, but it was so fast. At this time, Lin Yu thought about time and space, and the beast suddenly took Lin Yu towards the distance and escaped. The three-headed Wolf King beast just appeared in front of that person. At this time, the three-headed Wolf King beast's eyes were staring directly at that person, and then a thought came to his mind, that person just like this, a mouthful of blood spurted out of his mouth, and then his whole body began to roll on the ground. Master, spare my life. Master, spare my life. I know I was wrong. I know I was wrong. This matter is indeed a result of my subordinate's incompetence. Master, please show me your noble hand. The man felt as if his heart was being bitten by countless ants at the same time. At this time, his eyes and brows were filled with fear and disbelief. After a while, the man felt the pain on his body and disappeared a lot. At this time, the three-headed Wolf King beast glanced at the man coldly. Trash, you are simply a complete trash. What use do I need from you, a trash? The man buried his head very low, and there was a look of helplessness in the corners of his eyes and brows, and there was a bit of a wry smile at the corners of his mouth. Master, you can't blame me entirely. Not only is this guy's strength terrifying, but the most terrifying thing is that this guy has such a mind, and none of the strange beasts he carries are not this peerless beast, so. The three-headed Wolf King counted. After hearing what the man said, a sneer appeared at the corner of his mouth. Then he turned his head and glanced at the man coldly, with a look in his eyes, full of gloomy murderous intent. So what? Come and tell me, so what? The voice of the three-headed Wolf King beast began to become colder and colder. At this time, the man seemed to be able to feel the extremely terrifying aura on the three Wolf King beasts at this moment. At this time, he just lowered his head. Yes, I'm sorry. This matter is due to my subordinate's poor performance. Please punish me. The three-headed Wolf King beast just snorted coldly, don't forget, you are different from them. You are my slave. It's a pity that they escaped this time. If they didn't escape, with their power, if we devoured them, we would definitely be able to break the barrier left by the old guy. Even after leaving this area, Ye Lingxiu seemed to have lost her soul. She just stood there blankly. At this moment, in her mind, she recalled the scene when Lin Yu fought with that person. At this moment, Ye Lingxiu thought in her heart, is this really the strength that humans and strange beasts can show? The two of them are a little too scary. With their current strength, I'm afraid moving mountains and filling the sea is not a problem. What are the identities of these two people? After thinking of this, Ye Lingxiu turned her head and glanced at Lin Yu. There was an unbelievable look in the corners of her eyes and eyebrows, as if she was looking at a monster.